It's 7 o'clock. Here we go. I think the technology's working here. You never know. Good evening, Hoosiers. Well, summer holiday coverage is complete. So now we return to the regular every other week schedule of the Constitution Solution podcasts. But Hoosiers, I have some very serious news for you. What if I were to tell you that our constitutional republic is finished, non-functional, and that we now exist in a socialist, Marxist, globalist, collectivist, tyrannical oligarchy? The warning of Ben Franklin has come true. We couldn't keep it. But don't despair, Hoosiers. There is a way out of this mess. There is a solution. The Constitution Solution. Hello, I'm Dr. Chris McGarrah from Warsaw, Indiana, with yet another episode of The Constitution Solution. In order to better understand the 10th Amendment and to optimize our defense of Firewall, Indiana, I have been reviewing line by line the Indiana Constitution. The current Indiana Constitution is the second Constitution from 1851. It has 16 articles and one schedule paragraph at the end. So far, we have examined the first 8 articles, and tonight we'll study the very brief Article 9. State institutions. For the purposes of this discussion, I am reading from the Constitution of the State of Indiana, annotated by Andy Horning. That's Andy, A-N-D-Y, Horning, H-O-R-N-I-N-G, from his 2010 publication. You can find this online. He goes through the Constitution of 1851 with the amendments and makes little annotated comments. After studying Article 9, I urge you to stay with the podcast, as I will be submitting for your consideration what I have developed as model talking points for candidates in the crucial 2022 State General Assembly and other races. The primaries, of course, is what we're speaking about, and more succinctly, the Republican primaries. As a preface to that discussion, allow me to put forth what I believe would be a fitting motto for 2022. This quote is from Thomas Paine's Common Sense document, the pamphlets he wrote in 1776. And I quote, "'Tis not in numbers, but in unity that our great strength lies." Think about that for a while. 'Tis not in numbers, but in unity that our great strength lies. Think about it some more. Okay, before getting to Article 9, why was I so glum about the fate of our constitutional republic? Well, in all the commotion, this may have passed without your notice. But on July 31st, the CDC moratorium on evictions expired. Just suspend your disbelief for a moment that there can even be the CDC moratorium on evictions. One unconstitutional thing mandating another unconstitutional thing, but just go with the flow here. On June 29th, the Supreme Court of the United States, in a 5-4 opinion with Justice Roberts and Kavanaugh siding with the leftists, denied the application of the Alabama Association of Realtors to vacate the stay order of a lower court. In other words, that's that very complex legal language, but just go with the flow for a moment. Here is the actual decision. One page. In fact, one paragraph. I've never seen a Supreme Court opinion of one page. Now, yes, Justice Kavanaugh did indeed say that the CDC did exceed its statutory authority, but as a practical matter, the moratorium was to expire in a few weeks. So, what difference does it make? He implied. Respectfully, Justice Kavanaugh, it makes a great deal of difference. Remember the words of founder James Otis Jr. about those who oppose liberty. Pragmatism, malice, or ignorance. Remember those words. But to his credit, Justice Kavanaugh concluded, and I quote here, clear and specific congressional authorization would be necessary past July 31st, end quote. Well, what happened on August the 3rd? The CDC issued another eviction moratorium extending until October the 3rd. And this, Hoosiers, is why I maintain that we have crossed the line from a constitutional representative republic to a lawless tyranny. The president and Democratic members of Congress are essentially saying to the American people, we know this is unconstitutional, but we're going to do it anyway. They would ask you, where is the police force or the army to enforce this Constitution? It's just a parchment barrier. You don't like it? So sue me, they say, and the order still stands. I think the president and the Democratic members of Congress are sending us a clear signal, and it's not a nice one. Are you angry or troubled? Well, I'm angry. But anger is a waste of mental energy. Let's not get angry. Let's get even. Hoosiers, let's show them the exit ramp. Now, since we can't count on the vast majority of Republicans in Congress to support and defend the Constitution at this time, and that includes our locals, we must make our stand at Firewall, Indiana, And Hoosiers, you know what's frightening? We have only 9 months. That's right, 9 months to preserve the constitutions, the republic, and our God-given liberties. If liberty does not prevail in the May 2022 Indiana Republican primaries, it's over. 9 months. So let's get busy. Okay, let's get back to the Indiana Constitution, Article 1, State Institutions. Again, this is brief. Section 1. It shall be the duty of the General Assembly to provide by law for the support of institutions for the education of the deaf, the mute, and the blind, and for the treatment of the insane. Section 2. The General Assembly shall provide institutions for the correction and reformation of juvenile offenders. Section 3. The counties may provide farms as an asylum for those persons who, by reason of age, infirmity, or other misfortune, have claims upon the sympathies and aid of society. That's it. Article 9. Now, Andy Horning has the following comments. And Andy says, this was not intended as work camps for those who'd lost their homes to taxation and eminent domain. But this article was the extent of charity or welfare authorized by the Indiana Constitution. No Social Security, Medicare, etc., was ever legitimized in either state or federal constitution. The history of county farms and the poorhouse isn't perfect, but are we so sure that what we've replaced them with is better? In any case, the number of actual poor farms has dwindled to only about a dozen, since the New Deal replaced local aid with federal programs. I believe the last one in Indiana was built in 1987. We now have more poor people than ever. Their poverty has become transgenerational. Federal aid systems are very corrupt, and homelessness is a problem in want of an old solution. That's it. Like I said, Article 9 was brief. However, Article 10, Finance, is lengthy, complex, but very relevant. We will consider that article on Thursday, August the 19th on Facebook Live and YouTube at 7 p.m., assuming, of course, that I get all this technology to work. Now on to the second part of tonight's presentation, which I would call Thoughts on 9 months to save Indiana. 9 months to save Indiana. And I believe the partisan primaries are on something like Tuesday, May the 3rd. I could be a little bit wrong on that, but it's the beginning of May. Assuming that we don't have any more draconian mandates from the governor pushing back the elections like they did last time. Okay, topic number 1, uniform talking points. What I would suggest, and again, It's just suggestions. You should all take this up in your own discussion groups. Start stump speeches with 3 or 4 quotes. The necessity quote from William Pitt the Younger, 1783, is very good. He was not a founder. In fact, he's an Englishman. But his comment to Parliament in 1783 was timeless. He was both a member and, I believe, prime minister at one point. And the necessity quote, which we can use all the time here in Indiana, is as follows. Necessity is the plea for every infringement of human freedom. It is the argument of tyrants. It is the creed of slaves. Simple, to the point. So every time you hear the word coming out of Indianapolis, it's a necessity. Smile and wave. No. Next is the 1776 quote by founder and second president John Adams in his Thoughts on Government. This is what's commonly known as the fear quote. And I quote, "Fear is the foundation of most governments, but it is so sordid and brutal a passion, and renders men in whose breasts it predominates so stupid and miserable that Americans will not be likely to approve of any political institution which is founded on it." End quote. I don't think we learned from Adams. But you've got to give it that fear is constantly thrown at us to surrender our liberties. Fear. We will not be afraid. A third quote that I find useful is the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. It's a bit long, but the salient parts are, and I quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed." End quote. The consent of the governed. That's us, the people, in case those bigwigs in Indianapolis have forgotten. Samuel Adams proclaimed the natural rights of the colonists were, and I quote, "First, a right to life. Secondly, to liberty. Thirdly, to property, together with the right to support and defend them in the best manner they can. These are evident branches of the duty of self-preservation, commonly called the first law of nature." End quote. Very powerful words, will be very useful in 2022 primaries. Well, the other thing we must consider, and here this is, I do not have a good meme for this, if you will, but I think we need to consider the concept of a circle. I call it the circle of subsidiarity. Circle of subsidiarity. Well, what does that mean? That means you consider things from their basic units up to the more complex unit and how they're interrelated. And I think this can be useful in campaigning. So, excuse me. So what you've got here is you've got conception, in utero existence, childhood, independent adults, preservation of our liberty as children, as image bearers of God. I'm sorry, again, this, excuse me, is, like I said, raw, unplugged thoughts here. Preservation of our liberty as children, as image bearers of God. Preservation of our liberties as families, the family unit. Preservation of our liberty as counties, cities, and towns. Preservation of the liberty of our sovereign states. Yes, the states are sovereign. Read the documents. Now, constitutionally speaking, of course, counties, cities, and towns are political subdivisions of the state. But moving from smaller to larger units just has a nice ring to it. Preservation of our constitutional republic. Securing the liberty of individuals and society. And the circle, excuse me, comes back to and begins with God. Get it? Okay. Talking points for the movement and candidates. First of all, keep it simple. Keep it simple. Every race will have a unique quality to it. So not all the talking points will be useful, but whatever is useful in your particular area and race, keep it simple and stick with it. But for the liberty movement in general, here's what I see as 3 to 5 talking points. The key to liberty preservation, the long goal. And again, the left is good at thinking in long goals. We need to think in the long term also. But the long goal is to rescue our children. Rescue our children. Number 1, education. Separation of school and state. Separation of school and state. I think it has a nice ring to it. Parental choice education. Parental choice education. I think that has a nice ring to it too. Parental choice education as counter to the destructive nature of all the myriad critical theories. Big alert, big alert. Uniform talking point. All critical theories and the acronyms are simply identity-based Marxism. Identity-based Marxism. Never deviate from those words. It's just my suggestion. Repeat them thousands of times. Marxism is evil, and we need to make it stick. Never dual words with a Marxist, as they control the language. Don't sink to their level. Just keep repeating identity-based Marxism. Targets our children, our families, our society, our God. Number 2, the preborn. I'm open to suggestions. What is the best term for that period in the life of a person? We need protection at conception. Protection at conception. And there's a couple ways you can do that. There's the protection at conception bill, if you will, that's currently circulating. There could be a constitutional amendment on the state level. There's some wording to this that can be worked out. I have some ideas. Number 3, keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Nullify all Federal Firearms Act beginning with 1934. Period. No exceptions. Law enforcement will oppose this by and large, but we must stick to constitutional principles uniformly. We can't splinter. The Indiana Constitution, Article 1, Section 32 reads, "The people shall have a right to bear arms for the defense of themselves and the state." The people shall have a right to bear arms for the defense of themselves and the state. I think that's pretty strong too. Number 4, medical freedom. Now, you hear a lot of legal talk about the compelling interest of the state. Well, I'm sorry. The only, and I repeat, only compelling interest of the state is to secure the liberties of the people. Remember the Declaration of Independence? The only compelling interest of the state is to secure the liberty of the people, and that means that all medical treatments are voluntary unless individual liberty is infringed by due process. What I'm saying is that the tyrants must take all 6+ million Hoosiers to court individually to force a dress code, a business closure, which is a taking, or a medical treatment. A corollary to this is the repeal of the Emergency Powers Act. That will take a little bit of research to refine the talking points, but I'll get to it. And when it comes to the Emergency Powers Act, ask yourself, the Indiana founders did not see a need for it in either 1816 or 1851. What makes this time so special? Liberty's liberty. Number 5, restoring election integrity. This is key to the concept of a representative republic. And if you want details on how to do this, a good reference I would refer you to is the jbs.org, The New American Magazine article. It's an entire magazine on restoring election integrity. You can get it online. Now, remember what I've been talking about for some time now. The 3-question rule, is the key for consideration of every bill, act, or resolution considered by a government official. And the 3 questions must be considered in this specific order. Number 1, is it constitutional? Number 2, can we afford it? And finally, number 3, do we need it? You can't do it the other way around. It has to be constitutional, afford, and then need. And if the politician or candidate that you are talking to will not think in this manner, then don't vote for them, because they will not be considering your liberty. Now remember that the spectrum of government was zero government is anarchy. 100% government is collectivism. But there are only two stable forms of government in practice. One is our constitutional republic, which is about a third of the way from the right endpoint. The other is oligarchy, which is about a third of the way from the left end of the spectrum. And remember, we are not a democracy. We are not a democracy, and you never want that. So any candidate that runs around spouting democracy is ripe for the picking. So what you need to do, Hoosiers, is make a list of every representative and senator, that's state representative and state senator, and other officials who might be up for election in 2022. I mean, all the way down to your school boards and municipal and county officials, because I believe some of those elections are coming up and the primaries, and examine their liberty votes. Now, hopefully, soon we will have published various liberty indices where you can just attach a number to any incumbent, and it'll be very easy to decide if they need a challenge. Then primary, primary, primary. And remember, the talking points against opposition in primaries and in general elections. Founder James Otis Jr. said in 1761 that people oppose liberty for one or more of three basic reasons. Again, three things, three basic reasons. He called them guilt, malice, or folly. Guilt, malice, or folly. But let's translate that into 21st century American English. And that translates to pragmatism, malice, or ignorance. Pragmatism, malice, or ignorance. So when your opposing candidate opposes liberty, you just fire back at them. Well, what's wrong with you? Pragmatism, malice, or ignorance? And by ignorance, I mean ignorance of the principles of liberty and the constitutional state or republic. Now, this is much different, and not to be confused with the term stupid, which is a term of degradation. We're saying ignorance. So in debates and in other campaign activities, hammer on the point of why the opponent opposes liberty, pragmatism, malice, or ignorance, and then show the people that you know the Constitution's solution. The other thing you must consider, and this is as important as all the rest, that every county in Indiana must have a constitutional sheriff. You must have a constitutional sheriff, because the constitutional sheriff is the only thing standing between a tyrannical federal government and a tyrannical state government and you, the people. Constitutional sheriff. What is a constitutional sheriff? Well, I refer you to Sheriff Mack and Rogers' organization, the CSPOA, which is the Constitutional Sheriff and Peace Officers Association. I believe it's CSPOA.com or .org. I forget which one. But they have a quiz in there for a debate as to what constitutes a constitutional sheriff. So get it, read it. I actually made a video about it some time ago. We must have constitutional sheriffs because they are the key to nullifying unconstitutional federal acts and unconstitutional state acts. The constitutional sheriff is the last line of defense on Firewall, Indiana. Now, we all know that there are a multitude of liberty groups throughout the state, but I implore you all to cooperate and coordinate. Remember the words I said earlier from Thomas Paine in Common Sense, 1776. Remember, we've been through this before. So if you know your history, you will not repeat its mistakes. And what did Thomas Paine tell us was the key to victory? And he said, I quote, "'Tis not in numbers, but in unity that our great strength lies. 'Tis not in numbers, but in unity that our great strength lies." So come on, folks. You can still be the big fish in your little pond, but we've got to act together. Got to act together and in cooperation, because we only have 9 months to save Indiana. 9 months. We don't do it, it's all over. But I know, Hoosiers, we can do this. Well, so in conclusion, Hoosiers, remember doctor's orders. As always, wash your hands. Don't touch your face. But above all, keep your distance. Keep your distance from those socialists, statists, globalists, collectivists, politicians, and bureaucrats. Because now, Hoosiers, you know who they are. The curtain has been pulled back. They have nowhere to hide. So, it's time for Operation Pink Slip to give these people the "you're fired" to all Indiana politicians, especially the Republicans who oppose our God-given natural rights and liberties. We have only 9 months to rescue Indiana. 9 months. Don't waste a day. So, as they say on one of my favorite JBS video series, don't just know your Constitution. Don't just know it. Live it every day. Well, I'll see you next time, Hoosiers, on August the 19th, where we'll get right back to the Indiana Constitution. Article 10, Finance. See you then. Good night, everyone. 9 months. Let's get to work.